We are live.
Senate Appropriations, April 23rd. We are doing bills today. All the bills have been referred to us to see if we can get them all out on their journeys. Yesterday, we took up 933, the miscellaneous tax bill. We had some discussions, how they had moved money around. I had a discussion with the finance chair. She said they had voted out 7-0 after considering some different options, including the one we talked about of just moving the $10 million for 1 year. So she was not interested in any kind of discussion on that point. So I was thinking we're not have any other work on miscellaneous tax bill.
In light of which, would you entertain a motion?
Or what?
I would move that we move H 933 miscellaneous tax favorably.
Okay. Any discussion on that?
No minutes.
No amendment.
Okay.
As well, unless there could be amendments on the floor.
It's not a fact.
There could be discussion of it.
There could be discussion.
The first one, remember again, miscellaneous.
This is the miscellaneous tax bill. This is the bill which has a lot of stuff going on, but near the end of our discussion, Senator Westman brought up some concerns about how the finance committee had moved the $10 million to transit. They took some money out of the meals and rooms tax that affects the general fund. And so we had some concern around that construct. So I said we would hold off. I talked to the chair to see if there was maybe something that could be done there. She felt like they had considered all the options and then voted out 7-0. Didn't want. I'm not interested in a discussion.
So is this the one of the 3.8%? 3.8%?
No, that's the yield.
Yield bill.
Okay.
This is
We're coming to the yield.
yeah. This is the issue for our committee was mainly about this how it affects the general fund. This contract that they did where taking some money out of meals and rooms, splitting it differently, and then the purchase and use splitting that differently in the transportation fund, general fund, and transportation. I don't think we had any other really discussion points on that.
Authority, they took away the authority of the.
This is also the bill that takes away rule-making authority from Fish and Wildlife. My understanding, we were gonna let Senate Natural.
I have an amendment drafted, but would love to vet that with that crew.
Right, so instead of taking more testimony and trying to do it in here, let Senate Natural Resources we do that since that's their committee jurisdiction.
So the only concern personally that I have is I don't know what that amendment is.
Right.
And what it does. If it does the right things, I'd be, and we could pass it, I'd be okay with it. But right now, I'm not had with some of the things that.
Right.
Just legend.
Yeah,
I don't know what kind of a vote you're looking for.
I think no votes on this are fine. We're not trying to get a unanimous vote in this bill or anything. I think it's good to vote no if you have concerns and want to bring them up on the floor. It's better to vote no now than to say.
Well, I would have known yes if there was really a yes, but
Okay, all set. Senator Ruth,
Yes.
Senator Brennan, Indian Oath. Senator Lyons.
Yes.
Senator Norris. No. Senator Watson.
Yes.
Senator Westman.
No.
Senator Perslip.
Yes.
Okay, 4-3. Reporter.
I'm on the.
Right, yeah,
Shane.
I will. Okay. That worked. We can move on to H46. We have Councilman McLean here to help us know what the heck this thing is, why it's in our committee.
Hello.
I'll let Katie.
Yeah, let me try. Thank you.
This came out of your
Yeah.
Yeah.
Katie Whitman, Office of Legislative Counsel. We have H 46, an after leading to a rare disease advisory council. I'm happy to pull it up, but I'm guessing you probably don't want to dive too deeply into the language. As the name suggests, it creates an advisory council, a rare disease advisory council. Various rare disease experts, individuals with lived experience, and there is a per diem for people who are participating in the advisory council, who are not participating in their professional capacity. And I believe that's for not more than 4 meetings annually. The second component of this is there is language about long COVID and resources for primary care providers and patients who have long COVID. Those are the 2 main components of the bill. If you'd like to look at the language, I'll pull it up
Is
for
the
you.
council, we're only meeting 4 times, how many members would get money?
Let's see, we have 2 individuals with lived experience and a parent or guardian of a person with lived experience of a rare disease. Otherwise, we have some commissioners, we have a representative of the Health Equity Advisory Commission, so depending who that individual is
Right.
potentially. So that would be possibly 4, academic researcher, physician, nurse, pharmacist, geneticist. Those obviously wouldn't get it. And then we have this catch-all language, any other person deemed necessary by the Commissioner of Health. So potentially that could sweep in more individuals, maybe with lived experience or not participating in the professional capacity.
And is it being housed in Department of Health?
Mhm.
Are they going to pay the per diems?
So no, this language does not have them paying their per diems.
So the per diems would come from where?
The language we have doesn't specify. I think Nolan is going to say it's de minimis, but I'm not entirely sure that he will. Member of the advisory council not otherwise compensated for their participation shall be entitled to per diem compensation reimbursement expenses for not more than 4 meetings annually. So it doesn't specify a fund or an appropriation.
So yeah, I wonder what we do in those cases.
For the record, all my knowledge, my fiscal, usually it's assumed that the department that is
Right,
providing technical assistance would come out of their budget.
that's why I asked, but that's earlier in the bill, what we thought the Department of Labor would pay the per diems because it was a labor committee needed.
I just assumed, but maybe we didn't get discussion, I don't know. Or
Yeah, I think sometimes we have, but that's also when it's been large. This could be $2,000 or something.
Yes.
Could be small. Okay, I think if there's a case for de minimis to be made, this would be the case. Okay, any questions? Anything else you want to say, Centerline, since you passed this bill? Did you think the money for the per diem should come out of the firm?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, so with that, I'll entertain the motion to pass the bill favorably. Totally. Yeah, that was a totally moved. Total motion.
Senator Brew,
Yes.
Senator Brennan,
Yes.
Senator Lyon,
Yes.
Senator Norris.
Yes.
Senator Watson.
Yes.
Senator Westman.
Yes.
Senator Bergen.
Yes. The other thing. Sorry, reporter.
Unless Senator Norris would like to do it.
Think about that now.
It's got the word in it.
I know.
He might-
Yeah.
Okay.
Missed opportunity.
Rare disease.
all states in this dollar.
We could do H 577.
So one thing that's not on our chalkboard / agenda is Senator Hardy has an amendment to the budget that she's making on the floor that changes the wages of state's attorneys that get their legal license removed. So just have to suspend them. So this is similar to the work
Thank you, Katie.
GovOps did on salaries of sheriffs that lose their, well, whatever that is, police powers. So her amendment cuts the wages 30% if the state's attorney is basically disbarred, or I think the wording is disbarred or or issue under some administrative order by the Supreme Court.
Is that the same as they did to the sheriff or sheriff's?
I don't know if it's the exact same language, but it's the same idea.
Well, is the 30% the same? Is
So that would be it.
the 30%?
Well, that's a good question. So
You want me?
we could see if we could do that now if we're not ready to do these yield bill or the dam safety.
I'm not sure. Seems like that's a policy driven thing. I don't know why we would do it in here. I
She
mean,
just is not asking us to do it in here. She's asking us to review her floor amendment. So instead of doing it on the fly, when she does it next week, we would just say we heard it.
yeah, but it seems like it would be more relevant to have ops.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
we would,
I guess
Yeah.
because it's our bill.
If they did, if
Understood.
they did the sheriffs and this is trying to track them. I didn't do the sheriff's bill. I don't know about it.
Okay, yeah. No, I'm fine with just saying that she doesn't need to come in. She just can work with the chair and go up.
yeah, and even if they're not in possession of the budget, they could make a recommendation on the floor. I'd rather follow their recommendation than ours, honestly.
Yeah.
Because,
Yeah, I do too. Like,
except for Bob.
I would also. But I'm gonna.
What it says the opposite.
Given her state's
I
attorney,
think
they shouldn't get any.
Yeah, she's.
Well, yeah, I was
Yeah.
surprised.
So
Yeah. And
the way
that
I
would
think
create
about it is,
vacancy
I would
savings in the state's attorneys and.
showing it to us. I just think.
So she'll have to ask you, but okay.
Well, I know we're bad, but
Some kind of mold.
that would.
Both
vacancy
recommendations.
savings.
So can you relay that?
You did.
Just to be decided that we didn't need to hear from her.
You did.
We were there.
Yeah, you guys. Was it 30%? You remember?
I don't remember, but
Recently, when Senator Watson and I were in there, we had just made a constitutional issue when it came to the constitutionally elected positions, which is sheriff, state attorney. So just this past last year was when they addressed the reduction in the sheriff's state, depending on what level he or she had, as far as if they were barred, so on, so forth, but there was up to a 30% reduction. They keep back there when they get to practice law enforcement powers, whereas county or two lost their authority to perform law enforcement powers.
Yeah, I think there's two sheriffs right now that are into that.
I didn't get it.
Reduce. Yeah, that's a good question.
I don't think we can take away their whole salary. What we do not say.
How about giving them $1?
well, there was supposedly non-police related administrative work.
Right, they're
that
still-
they could be.
Right, they're still administrating the office, I guess. Okay,
Mhm.
we will not do that, so. Now.
Yeah.
Do we need to wait till 2 o'clock to do the yield? Oh, no, we've done here.
These things right there.
He's not there. Yeah, hello. You want to talk to us about the yield? bill?
Sure do.
H949.
Let's do it. So I am John Gray with the Office of Legislative Counsel. I will screen share with you guys. Let me join the Zoom real quick. And then I think, just because the amendment you have received from finance is a set of instances of amendment, I'll need to show the underlying bill as passed the House, just so you can make sense of the whole thing. As we're doing that, I can call out, foreshadow the changes that you will see on the Senate side from. Just a second. That's funny.
Races out there.
I know.
I said,
It's just me outside.
Is that why you pulled the fire alarm earlier?
Microwave submarine.
What were you doing in the elevator that I saw you was earlier? I don't know which elevator.
Did we have more than that?
Yeah,
At least in that now.
microwave.
just the surface of.
Okay. So H949, this is what passed the House, so this is not what came from Senate Finance, but you'll need this for context. So yield bill, you guys are familiar with the yield bill. Occasionally the yield bill contains some sort of technical cleanup provisions. I will note them as we go through the back of the bill. But the first piece is you're going to see sections 1 and 2 of the yield bill has passed the House, set out the yields and the non-homestead rate that result from applying half of the 104.9 million transfer from the general fund, and we'll talk about that in a second. Because as you guys know, that was reduced down to 100.9 to align with the expansion of the renter credit, which I will get to. But in the House concept, what you see is half buy down, so 52.45 million of the FY27, and then reserving the other 52.45 million. So these are the yields and the non-homestead rate that reflect that. Section 2 is the creation of a reserve to apply that other half, the 52.45 in FY28. It's a simple way to explain it, but just know both of these sections go away in the Senate Finance Amendment.
Will you later on give us the tax rate that gets us?
So I can give you the uniform non-homestead, but obviously the homestead rate for each district would vary based on what you will get from Julia is the expected average increase, which is I think the figure that folks are looking for. It's like the 3.6. Yeah.
Well, but it wouldn't be with this.
No, it would not be with these measures. It would be in the finance amendment that I'll come to in this. So section 3, this is jumping to the technical provisions. I don't have to belabor this one unless you guys are particularly interested, but you may be familiar with the statewide adjustment, which is meant to be a mathematically neutral tool applied to property tax bills. It really affects the presentation of your property tax bills, and it reduces basically the effects of the CLA. It makes it so that the presentation of your property tax bill doesn't look like the CLA is doing so much to your tax rate. It is mathematically neutral. The issue, and why you see it here, is that you have to make so many updates throughout the statutes to ensure that it's actually mathematically neutral. And this is amending a section of law related to the property tax credit. This was not picked up when the statewide adjustment was implemented. And that's because when the statewide adjustment was implemented, it really affects the presentation related to property values. But the property tax credit is determined by the relationship between the property yields and the income yield. So the fix wasn't applied on the income side. It's actually quite hard to do. So the solution that's arrived at here, just to describe it in plain English, is this basically insulates the property tax credit chapter from the application of the statewide adjustment. It doesn't affect at all the way folks' property tax bills will appear. It doesn't affect at all the way that their taxes are determined. It doesn't affect the size of the credit. In the absence of doing this, the property tax credit is miscalculated. So that is why this is included. You have to have the fixes to ensure that the application of the statewide adjustment is mathematically neutral, and this is one more fix to ensure that that's the case. I can't go into greater detail if you are interested, but I'm guessing it's not especially interesting.
Uh-oh. I think the thing that somebody.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you can explain mathematically neutral. What does that mean to you?
It means that it has no effect on your tax liability. So the statewide adjustment, when it was introduced a few years back, is not intended to affect at all what you pay on your bills. It's just meant to affect where the CLA is built in. If it's built into the yield, then when it shows up on your property tax bill, the difference between the rate that you will see and the CLA adjustment that's made is smaller. But in the end, the math works out the same. You get the same bill as you would have gotten pre-statewide adjustment. It just affects the presentation. The problem is when it's not implemented in a way that picks up all the ways in which it needs to be neutral, it has a substantive effect. And that's the issue that's being resolved here, is it's not intended to have any effect at all, and it is having one unless you do the fix. Okay. Section 4, you guys may be familiar with this. Occasionally, there are overpayments from TIF districts. City of Barry had one last session as well, I believe, or maybe last year. This is a function of the software that's used to calculate the payments that are owed to the ed fund. And this is just a measure that refunds the City of Barry from the ed fund about $150K for those overpayments. My understanding from testimony is that this should be the last year in which this fix is required for Barry, that apparently the software issue is resolved. You say I can't promise that, it's just what I have heard. And note that because this is pulled from the Ed Fund, these figures do factor into the yields rate. And that's reflected above. Section 5 is another technical piece. Again, one I don't think I have to hit too hard. The simple way to think about this section is the census block grants, which are provided for special education, included, you can see this in the structure language on this page, a number of, I'm going to say strange, but that's not totally fair, but just for these purposes, varying inflation factors over the course of these years, right? There's a reason for it. When this was first set in statute, they're trying to move everyone from varying census block grants toward a uniform grant. And so they were incrementally moving folks for that uniform amount. And they had to build in different inflation factors, including for periods in which they wouldn't have the inflation factor yet. So you have these different inflation factors. The issue and why this is in front of you now is that no inflation factor was included beyond 2026. So this would have become a stagnant number. So what this bill does is it makes this statute way easier to read. It strips out all of the transitionary language. I'm going to scroll past the underline so you can see we don't need to talk about in FY23 what the amount would be. We don't need to talk about in fiscal year 24 through 26 what it will be. We can just say this. Now that you've arrived in the future, right? The amount of the census grant shall be the uniform base amount multiplied by the SU's long-term membership. And the other nice feature here is in cleaning up all this transitional language, you could just outright codify what the FY27 amount is, 2350. And then you increase by inflation going forward. I will call out one unique thing here is typically you'll see in the education space an inflation factor that's just based on the 1 year change in NIPA. What you see here is a 3-year rolling average, and that's done to try to decrease volatility essentially. So if you had one off year, it would be mitigated by the other 2 years in that 3-year period. But otherwise, the simple thing this section is doing, codifying the agreed FY27 census block grant amount, the uniform base amount of 2350, and then inflating in perpetuity so that you don't have a stagnant figure. Lastly, in the House, the effective date. Sorry, only one. Okay, so that is the context. And I'm happy to answer questions on this, but I'm going to jump over to the finance amendment, which will have some significant updates.
Earlier I was looking for what would the average tax rate be under the House.
I think Julia will have to speak to that. Yeah.
Okay.
She gave us those numbers yesterday.
Okay.
Okay. Jumping over to what is directly in front of you, the finance amendment to what came over from the House. So the concept that you're going to see here, this is striking out section 1, which set the yields and non-homestead rate reflective of that half buy down. The yields that you see here, and I know that this was discussed earlier this week, reflect nearly the full buy down of that 104.9 million. I say nearly the full because 4 million of that, as you guys have already talked about in here, you'll recall that 104.9 was being transferred from the general fund to the Ed fund, could be available for buy down purposes. Now 100.9 million, as I understand it, is going to be transferred to the Ed fund, which is used to produce these yields and this non-homestead tax rate. So a property yield of 9,395, income yield of 12,942, and a non-homestead rate of 1.648. I know those are sort of meaningless to you in the absence of other information, but that's what you have for now. And Julia will give some more context on what they actually translate to in reality. But basically, this reflects the full buy down of that 100.9 million that is transferred. So using all that is transferred from the general fund to the Ed fund for the buy down, and that 4 million, I'm going to come to this later in the bill, but because later in the finances amendment is that proposed expansion of the renter credit for just a year, that's going to cost a little bit more. And so that 4 million remains in the general fund and can be applied for that one-time increase in the renter credit. Of course, this means, as you see on page 2, that the section 2 from the House is struck. That was your Ed fund reserve, that 52.45. You're no longer reserving any funds, right? The full amount is being used to buy down tax rates. And so your new section 2 is replacing those existing provisions with, this should be very familiar to you guys. These are exactly the provisions from S220, which began as the allowable growth bill and became essentially a change to the way that the excess spending threshold works. This is something that's already passed the Senate, but just to re-familiarize you guys with this, for determining excess spending, certain things are excluded from the calculations that you aren't double taxed above the threshold, right? The change that the existing law says that the one exclusion we have from calculating excess spending is school construction bonds that were approved prior to July 1 of 2024. The change that is in S220 and included here as well is there is no time limit. Any school construction bond voted by a district would be excluded from that excess spending calculation. You can think of this as essentially removing the disincentive. It's still going to cost the district, it's still going to cost the state, but they're not going to be double taxed on that portion. So same measure as S220, just want you to know what that is. So it's excluding all voter approved bond payments from ed spending for purposes of calculating that excess spending. The other big change in S220, one is simple to see. The existing excess spending threshold is at 118%. The statewide average will spend just like 25, played it forward, and I recall talking about this in here. And that is reduced down to 112%. So you have a lower excess spending threshold. So you would expect more districts to hit this, more kind of disincentive applied, more cost control is the idea. However, there is this incredibly important piece under subdivision C, which is kind of a hold harmless type provision that we've talked about before. Again, this is all exactly as in S220 as passed the Senate. But here we see that a school district's excess spending shall be zero if any of these conditions are met. One, if the district's aggregate ed spending is flat, if it did not increase from the preceding year, they would have no excess spending, even if their ed spending per pupil would necessarily result in them being above the threshold. It was a very similar provision. If your per pupil spend isn't greater than your aspire per pupil spend, you would not be subjected to the excess spending penalty. Again, even if you're above that 112. And lastly, there's an appeals process built in. Secretary of Education, with the advice of three business managers and superintendents, selected by the Secretary. They determined that the increase in the district's per pupil spend above that threshold was for good cause or beyond the district control, such as due to emergency capital expenditures or substantial loss of pupils or offsetting revenues, would also not be subject to an excess spending penalty. Again, this is all exactly as was in S220. Just want to remind you of what those measures were.
And if I could just throw in, the idea of adding it here was to bump it up in the House awareness that just keeping 220 on the wall is not going to make this discussion go.
That's what's happening. It's not, that hasn't been taken up from the House.
Yeah, not in any substantive way.
Right, and the yield bill's a must pass. So if it is in there,
So everything from S220.
this is the whole of S220 in this second instance of amendment. The other changes are what we just were hinting at with using that 4 million, keeping it in the general fund for purposes of the expansion of the renter credit instead of transferring that as part of the 1.9 to the ed fund. So the third instance of amendment is new sections at the end of the yield bill. Basically, this is touching the maximum amount available for the renter credit. And so in current law, it is capped at 2,500. And what you see is a 1-year increase from 2,500 up to 3,250. So it increases the cap on what someone can receive under that program. In addition,
1 year.
this is only in effect for
next
next, exactly.
And it'll go back to 25.
Goes back, and that'll be sections 8 and 9. You'll see it returning to the current law concept.
And that,
The 1 year, the idea is you're taking that 4 million for 1 year to expand the renter credit just done. So you increase, what's proposed here is increasing the cap. And the other piece here is the way that the credit is determined. Under current law, the calculation is that it is at the highest, if you're in this extremely low income bracket, it's tiered, right? If you're in the extremely low income bracket, you get the highest calculated credit. and then it sloped down until the very low income limit. Above that threshold, there's no renter credit available. So in addition to increasing the cap, that 2,500 up to 3,250, the calculation is shifted from being for those in the extremely low income bracket, instead of 10% of fair market rent, it becomes 12.5% of fair market rent. So you can think of these as both expanding the renter credit. One is expanding the calculation used to determine it, and also the point from which it will slope down to the very low income bracket. And then it's also expanding or increasing the cap, again, just for a 1 year period. So you would expect this to not shift the folks who fall into the pool, right? It's still the same eligibility conditions that kick you in. This is just expanding the funds that are available, or the maximum credit, the amounts that they would receive for those folks who are already eligible. And you're going to see it, it's the same conforming changes throughout, right? Moving from that 10% fair market rate up to 12.5. And then there's a separate section in 7 that says the same thing we saw above. In 2 instances, that cap of 2,500 is set out in law. And so this is just making sure that you make the change in 2 places. As I previewed, sections 8 and 9 just return that 1 year provision back to existing law. So you see a downward amendment, cap moving from 3,250 down to 2,500, and the calculation moving from 12.5% down to 10%. That's how we know that it's just a 1 year provision. Effective dates, most of the measures take effect July 1 of this year, as you might expect, right? The yields take effect then for the FY27 budgets and rates. The statewide adjustment corrections immediate, the very tip of payment refund, and the census grant inflator. Additionally, that renter credit expansion and renter cap credit increase. They go into effect this July 1. I will note that there is some clarifying language that I think is going to be offered. It's not an actual change to the effective date, but it's confirming the claim years to which that renter credit expansion applies, just for clarity's sake, but it is not a change. And then sections 2 and 2A, that's your S220 provisions. And then your renter credit narrowing and renter credit cap reduction would take effect July 1, 2027. So returning you the following year to the renter credit that you have now, and putting in place those modifications to the excess spending threshold. And that is the yield bill.
Thank you. Ms. Richter, we had a question while you were away that
Okay.
we were told that you would be the one to answer.
Only,
Oh, wow, that's a lot of pressure.
I was wondering, under the house's construct, what would the average tax rate be?
Sure, Julie Richter, JFO, under the house's construct of the yield bill, the average property tax bill would increase by approximately 6.7%. As compared to this version, which is estimated to increase property tax bills on average by 3.8%.
So, not to put too fine a point on it, but the house's construct could easily lead to double-digit increases in some districts.
Yes, and absent, I guess I would say, I don't know if the Senate proposal could as well. The challenge is that because homestead property tax rates vary by district, and because homestead property tax bills are a function of both a household's income and a household's property value, that dependent on how their income and property value change year over year, they could experience a significant shift, either up or down, depending on how their income has changed.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about, it tends to be reported out, the average number. And it makes some people feel good, some people feel bad, but everyone is surprised when the average number is doubled in a community. Thinking of Woodstock and that area were very hard hit, even though the average was lower.
But that could be by the CLA.
Yeah, all sorts of factors. I'm just I guess I would look at it that our version significantly reduces the chance of double-digit increases in.
Yeah, the Senate version puts almost double the amount of general fund to property tax bills, which results in lower
Yeah.
property tax bill. But I appreciate the point you're making that it really is very much an average. So there will be towns that see an average decrease below 3.8% or below 6.7% or wherever the bill lands, and there will be towns that experience above that. Yep.
Thank you.
So there's a 3% spread between the House and the Senate. Yes, 3.1, right?
A percentage point, yes.
Senator Watson.
Well, I'm thinking about in terms of what is the likelihood, because this is, forgive me for getting the number wrong, but it's about $100 million, right? That
100.9.
yeah, right. That 100.9 that we'd be applying. So
Plus what's on the bottom line at the end.
Yes,
yes,
That's part.
22.3 million of education fund surplus.
okay.
So both the House and Senate construct would use the entirety of the 22.3 million of ed fund surplus to lower property tax bills. The difference is how much general fund.
Mhm.
The Senate uses the 100.9.
And it makes me wonder about the likelihood that we would have $100 million. Because at some point, you mean I can't keep doing that, right? And so it's not sustainable. And so, thinking about like, are we headed into a recession? What is the likelihood that we have even half of that going into the next year? So that's a concern.
And obviously a fair concern, and one that motivated the decisions we made 2 years ago to leave the rate at 13.8 average, which was, roundly rejected by the voters. I guess what I would say here is these are opening gambits for a conference committee. So the yield bill will be conferenced, and the two polls are, the 3.6 or whatever and 6.7. And then obviously the House is going to be arguing to bring down our number. I would just caution us all that the governor is clear that he wants a full buy down or near it. I think we've satisfied that with our number. If a conference committee came out with 4.5%, I don't know that he would be willing to sign that. So. And the thing is, if it gets vetoed and then we have to come back at it, I think you lose two different ways. So. But it is not sustainable long term.
I probably should shut my mouth, but
Yeah,
I agree with you. The only thing I like about this is the caps, I think, are to trump.
I'm sorry.
Caps.
The caps.
You mean the excess spending fund?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I agree. And that, obviously, that's also gonna have to be bargained because the House didn't have anything like it, so. But I don't see how anybody realistically believes we get out without some intermediate cost control.
Okay.
You're welcome.
So any other comments or questions about page 949? The bill? Yes, I agree.
If you would be willing to entertain a motion, I would move that we vote out H 949 favor
Okay,
with explanations.
Lots of explanations.
you have that in the clerk.
Thank you.
Senator Baruch,
Yes.
Senator Brennan, yes. Senator Lyons,
Yes.
Senator Norris, yes. Senator Watson.
Yes.
Senator
Explanation.
Yes. Well, that's what you.
Yes, but yes.
Senator Waxman.
For the explanation.
Do you have a volume?
Maybe with explanation.
Well, I'm gonna have an explanation.
Have a, yeah, Senator Birchland.
Yes. How did you record Senator Westman's vote?
I took that to be a yes.
Oh, okay. Okay. Only one person that can argue with that. Okay, anybody want to explain that?
Well, I would like to keep thinking about it. I don't know how I'll vote on the floor, but I wish there was, and I don't have a solution to this, but you know, going on into the future, I would feel a lot better about it if there was some way to plan for the reduction of structural debt in the streets.
I will, I should. Use the general fund as the punching bag.
I don't like would be this just, or it puts a lot of pressure on the general. I did find that for explanation.
Well,
Yeah.
We've done two things. Today,
Okay.
Yeah.
Explain.
You're also explaining your vote? Or
no.
you want to respond to an explanation?
Well, I was just gonna say what Senator Watson talked about is obviously the logic of the House version. So that will be available to the floor. In the sense that if you don't vote for the amendment, you're voting for the House.
Doesn't 3/4 Senator Brewer?
So,
I am?
Yeah.
All right. I'm fine with that.
let Brucey do it.
I don't think what we're doing is sustainable at all. And I think that there are folks in the health world who work really hard to reduce costs in the hundreds of millions of dollars. Some of that will fall back and affect property tax increases. And I think we need to keep looking at how we can have structural reform on all of this. Not sustainable.
true. Okay, we succeeded in passing out the yield bill with explanations. So now we're gonna move to the dam safety bill. I'm gonna see this here.
I'm working on both of getting either of them now, because it's 250. And I haven't seen the bill for screen.
Frank,
Yeah.
sounds.
Want a little break, I'll figure that out.
We will take a break and we have a